Hi folks, this is going to be a quick overview showing how to get started with Relational AI using the VS Code extension. So the first thing you want to do is download Visual Studio Code and then go to the extension marketplace, which is over here on the left sidebar, and type Relational AI into the search bar. That's going to pull up Relational AI, and you will have a blue install button that you can click here, and that will install the extension. Then once that's installed, you'll do Command-Shift-P and you can type Relational AI. So this is called the command palette, and we are filtering to see only the Relational AI commands. And this is going to be really helpful for situations where you want to find a command but you don't know what it's called, or you don't know where to find it within the user interface. This is kind of a good home base to fall back to figure out what the available options are. And in particular, the first thing you want to do is get your client ID and client secret from your account manager. So that's going to be how you connect securely to Relational AI system. And you can select this credentials option and enter your secret and ID there, and it will create a folder called config, a file called config in a folder called .ri in your home directory on your computer. And that way, all of the Relational AI SDKs, as well as the VS Code extension, will be able to find your credentials there and use them to connect to the service. So the next thing we want to do is open up the integrated terminal, because we want to get a demo project to get started. So you can do git clone https://github.com/sswatson/faa-flights, and this is just going to be a demo project that we can use. So we perform that clone operation, and then in the menu in your application you can do file, open folder, and that will open up a folder like this, and we can select FAA flights and click open, and now we're in our project folder and we can get started. Now this is the collection of files in the folder itself. We're also going to want to see what's going on in the cloud in our database. So that's going to be available under the Relational AI icon here, but instead of clicking on it at first, I'm actually going to open up this right panel and drag it over there, and this will make it sort of durably accessible from this right panel rather than the left one. And I personally prefer that because that way it stays out of the way of the file explorer, so we can see both of these things at once if we want. But you can open it up in the left. You can open it up in the left sidebar as well. Now we see here our databases, our engines, and our transactions. I'm going to close transactions for now. If you need to create an engine, you can do that from here. With the plus button, you can also delete engines and check on the engine status and so forth. You can also create databases. If you don't have a database at first, you want to click this plus button, and you specifically want to name it FAA flights, because this particular project has a filter, which we can look in the configuration file here, that only allows things called FAA flights to show up in the databases list. And this feature exists because in a lot of accounts there are many databases, and there has to be a way to filter them, or else you're kind of spending a lot of time scrolling up and down trying to find the right one. And we have that turned on here. So you can either change this by just deleting this line and saving the file, or you can name your database FAA flights so that it consistently picks up the right one. You want to click on each of these items to select it, to make it orange like this. So this is showing that I have this engine selected and this database selected. And that's important because when the system is going to communicate with the back end, it needs to say what's the current database and what's the current engine. And that's how it does it. So you want to make sure these are clicked on so that they've been selected. By the way, this configuration file has a bunch of other options. You have a model directory to say where your models are. You have read query files and write query files, which allows you to provide a list of globs that allows the system to know when something should be executed in write mode versus read mode, and so on. There are various other options, not just these four. There's a configure command that you can use to find all of the different options. You can read a little description of each one, and then you don't have to put it in manually. You can actually click on it, and it will go ahead and put that entry in your TOML file. So it's sort of a wizard providing some assistance with that process, so you don't have to reference documentation every time you want to mess with this thing. Okay, so let's show now how to set up the database. So we've created a database. Mine has stuff in it because it was already there, but I'll show you how to populate it. in this particular project. So this information is available in the README. It's providing some details about how to get started. And then in the context of the particular project, how to load the data. So there are three things that you need to load. One of them is just going to be in this .rel file that's going to pull some files from S3. So you can select all of the text with like Command A or Control A, and you can do Shift Enter. And because it's in the data directory, which we configured as our write directory, it will run this in write mode, and it will install all of these CSVs, or rather load all of these CSVs in the database. So you can do Shift Enter there, and that will perform that operation. I'm going to skip it because I already have it loaded. But then we also have some data files here, as well as CSV and a JSON file. So you can do Command Shift P and then load JSON, and click that, and then you enter a name for the JSON, and then you will select this file from a file browser, and it will put that base relation into your database. And you can then start working with it. Same concept for CSV. Command Shift P, load CSV. I'll do RelationalAI CSV. RelationalAI CSV, and I can do load CSV, and same thing. I enter name for the relation, and then I pull this up in a file dialog, and it will upload that for me. So I'm going to skip those operations because I've already done them. But that's how you would install the base data. Then the next thing you want to do is Command Shift P and sync models with cloud, and that's going to look in the model directory, look at all these files, and send them to the cloud. So if you don't have them already, it will just put all of these models into your database. If you have already done it, then it will look at the differences and then ask for guidance if there's conflicts. So once you've put your base data and your models into the database, then the database is good to go. So let's take a look at what it looks like over here. So we're going to have three top-level pull downs that we can check out. So one is called base relations, and there we can just check out what our base relations are for this data set. So for example, one of them is called aircraft data. We can click on that, and it's going to open up this output pane, and it will display the result as a table. And this is the way it's represented in the relational AI system. And you'll notice that it's not wide. It only has 3 columns, and the first one is a symbol that represents the column name. Then this represents which row it is in the CSV file, and this is the actual value in that column and row in the CSV file. If you want to look at it more like the original shape, you can pivot it with this button, and then that way you can scroll across and see the columns. You can see, there's some missing values in the CSV file. You kind of get a sense of the structure this way, and it's easier to look at. You also have control over how many things get loaded here, so you can see fewer rows. So it can go all the way to 10 to the 0, which just shows the first row in each column. And because there's some missing data, in order to show at least one row in each column, it ends up having to show, in this case, 3 total rows. But this number here is going to dictate how many rows that you see per what we call specialization, or the number of rows of each particular type that's available in this original view. But in the wide view, it's going to basically more or less roughly correspond to the number of rows. So the point here is just to enable you to see smaller or bigger slices of the data. You can also click on this export to export the CSV contents that you're looking at to the editor in case you want to save them as a CSV or edit them, or open them in Excel or something like that. You have that option available. Okay, next we're going to look at the models. So as we said, this is going to correspond one-to-one after the sync operation with the models in this directory. Each one of these models has a few options. We'll talk about this one a little bit later, but here this is the cloud edit icon, and you can click this one and it will open the model, but this is actually not on your local file system. This is actually reading directly from the cloud. So when you edit this buffer and save it, it's not saving here, it's going to save directly into the cloud. So this is sort of like opening something in the console allows you to reach directly to the remote database and mess around with your models. You don't generally have to do that because you can edit them locally and then sync, but if you want to, that functionality is available. You can also pull them up directly in your local file system here. You can delete a model. You can also add models either directly to the cloud or locally. And you can view all of the relations that are defined in all of the models under derived relations. And this allows us to, first of all, see where they are. So if you're reading your code and you see a name and you're like, wait, where's that defined? You can pull it up over here and you can see where it's defined. So for example, state, that's defined in types.rel. I can click that here and click that here and it will it'll pull it up for me. It even highlights that particular line. The other way of looking at derived relations is to go to this graph icon, which it's probably best to start with the one that is next to the name of the database itself. And what that's going to do is create this dependency viewer, which shows up like this, and it's showing you there are a bunch of relations here, and it's showing you how they're related to each other. So the orange ones are the base relations, and the blue ones are the derived relations, and the edges are indicating that a particular derived relation references some other relation in its definition. Okay, so you can drag these things around, zoom in and out, and see what's going on. You can click on any relation to get some information about it. So I'm going to click on carrier here, and we find it's a derived relation. It's defined in the model schema mapping, so you can click that, and it will pull it up directly. It even highlights it here. It shows you here's where this relation is defined. And it tells you the number of columns, which is 3, and the number of rows, which is 63. And you can drill down and see more detail if you click on this box. So carrier has 3 subrelations with these 3 names. If we want to see code, we can click that one, and we can see that code maps some entities to some names. So this entity represents, for example, Northwest Airlines, and there's NW. We can close that back. We can look at the names and so forth. So this is a different view on the data. It works for any sort of relation and not just something that represents an ordinary wide table, and it allows you to kind of drill down one subrelation at a time. You can also click at the bottom on these triple dots and get more than 10 values. So it's 10 at a time by default. So you can go left to right or top to bottom through this exploration process, and then collapse things back. Now, you can run read queries from your code either from .rel files or from a Markdown file. So I'll show you a Markdown file. So the extension knows how to deal with Markdown. Here I have an example of a kind of small self-contained query. I can just put the cursor anywhere inside that fence code block and do Shift-Enter, and it will pick up the code and run it as a read query and show me the output here. So I'll collapse these sidebars. It'll show me the output as a read query here, so you can see the type of the query. If you wonder what code was run, you can open that up here. It's going to be available there. And notice when you run a query, the button in the top right is a cancel button. So if something's taking too long, you can cancel it there. You can also cancel from the transactions list. So each running transaction will have a cancel button to the side. Speaking of which, you can open up a transaction item, and there's a link to open it in the console, so you can find more details there. There are also several features for the editing experience. So for example, if we open county.rel, so we have code folding, so we can tell the system fold all the comments, or we can tell it to fold everything, and then we can kind of drill down and we get sort of an outline view of our code. We can unfold everything again. We also have some autocomplete. So if I want to refer to flight graph or any of its subrelations, I have those here. The autocomplete also works for Unicode, so I can type like sqrt, and that gives me access to square root, or like integer division is \div, and you just you hit tab or enter, to select those items. There's hover support for built-in relations, so if you want to know how range works, you can type range and then hover over it and you get the doc string there. We also have outline support, which is over here. So you can see flight graph as well as the subrelations within it, and you can use that to navigate. And lastly, we have the profile button in the bottom left. So you see I'm on my default profile here. I can click this, and if I have other profiles set up in my .ri/config, I can find them all here and switch between them. And one last tip, I find the color theme that I'm using here to work really nicely with the relational AI colors. If you want to use the same one, you want to go to the extension marketplace and search for one called GitHub theme. And once you install that extension, you can do Command-Shift-P, type theme, you have preferences color theme, and that allows you to pull up various options, and this one is GitHub dark dimmed. And that's going to be it for this overview. I hope you enjoy using the VS Code extension, and if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear from you.